Family and fellow soldiers, I'm the Professor, and this is the Moment of Truth. It's been a very revealing few weeks for Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett. I would say that it's been a strange few weeks for her, but let's be honest, since when has she not been neck deep in the middle of weird? There was an interview about her that was done by The Atlantic. It was a profile. And this Atlantic profile of Crockett got headlines because at one point the Atlantic writer did what every profile piece about a particular politician does. They began making inquiries to the subject's other party members and to ask what they thought about them so-and-so. When Crockett heard about that the Atlantic was reaching out to other Democrats to get their opinion about her, Crockett revoked the Atlantic's access to her, and she also said that she was revoking whatever permission she had given to them. But that was closing the proverbial barn door after the horses had already escaped. When politicians agree to talk to a reporter, permission to be quoted directly as well as whatever information that they give is laid out in advance. If a politician doesn't make it clear from the outset that an interaction with a journalist is supposed to be off the record, then the reporter feels free to use whatever is said and even to attribute it to that politician. This is the reason that virtually every story, especially in the big white media outlets, if it's supposed to be from a politician or from one of their staffers or whomever, they always quote some anonymous source, unnamed source, person close to the administration, person with knowledge of thus and so, etc. That's the reason why you see that so much. And for Jasmine Crockett, a woman with a law degree, she sure is naive, if not dumb, when it comes to dealing with the white media. In fact, that seemed to be the slant that The Atlantic was putting out here. That Jasmine Crockett, for all of the attention that she is getting, well, this woman just isn't ready for prime time. You see how clumsy she is in a mere normal interaction with the media. Just a normal profile piece and she loses her mind. That's the point that they were trying to get across. Jasmine Crockett simply ain't ready for the big leagues. She figures all she has to be is a sassy city girl and snap her fingers and roll her neck and that the world would be her oyster, but she's finding out the oyster doesn't have any pearls in it. And just to make sure that nobody missed the white media's point that Jasmine Crockett isn't ready for the big leagues, the Atlantic piece started out saying that Crockett had been campaigning heavy to get Democrats to make her the top pick to be put on the House Oversight Committee. She had been competing with other Democrats to see which one of them would get that slot, and that it was a race that Jasmine Crockett was losing. In fact, part of why she was losing her bid for that position is because the Congressional Black Immigrant Caucus decided not to support her. The Atlantic reported that rather than support Crockett, members of the CBC instead decided that they were going to vote for a senior-most person in the race, even though that person wasn't a member of the Black Immigrant Caucus. So that most likely meant the person that the CBC was going to back was going to be white, which tells you everything you need to know about that group of clowns and what they're actually about. Jasmine Crockett was angry about this. I guess she's too dumb to realize that the CBC is a gang of foreign flag sellouts and buck-dancing bootlicks from abroad. They don't support anything unless it has to do with immigrants. They absolutely hate foundational black Americans, and truth be told, they hate black people in general. And if they can't find an immigrant to vote for, then they'll just back whatever white Democrat is standing around, but they're not going to be backing us. That's how the pecking order is in their minds. Back a white person first, and then if they get permission from massa, they'll back some immigrant, whether they be black or not. But as for foundational black Americans, don't dream. This is why the CBC is chock full and overflowing with these immigrants, because white power engineered it that way. White donors looked for people who had no connection to us and weren't going to be making the kind of trouble that we make, compliant sellouts who would do masses bidding, all the while lying through their teeth and laying false claim to our history and our struggle and our ancestry and our lineage. People who have no connection to us, and yet try to con everybody else into thinking they are us. They see themselves as some kind of non-racial immigrant group, which is why we have to purge them from the political landscape. Now, I'm not trying to go off on a tangent or on a rant, but Jasmine Crockett stumbling like this and making this big a mistake, there's a reason for it, and here's what the reason is. Lineage matters because we are all of us the result of our collective experiences. And when someone comes from a lineage and an experience of fighting and striving and overcoming, they have nothing in common with somebody who decided to flee from every fight that ever came along, who bowed down and bent over for every enemy who's ever come along, and who has sold out their own family members and anybody else they could find. An experience of fortitude, honor, and uncompromising struggle can never be made compatible with an experience of lying, bowing, scraping, and fleeing. Pan-Africanism wasn't a bad idea as a concept, but we live in the real world, And in the real world, all that matters is how things work in practice. And in practice, Pan-Africanism led directly to this flat definition of blackness that made it where we extended the same camaraderie to people who do and will always practice tribalism. They refused to unite amongst their own in Africa and the Caribbean, and here we were throwing open the doors for them and giving them the benefit of the doubt because we are all fighting white supremacy, right? And when we did that, white power began floating these tethers university admissions, began selectively elevating them, giving them all kinds of preferential treatment on the basis of being immigrants, and making sure that the ones who were the most hostile towards us would be elevated to positions to do the most harm to us. And all the while we were voting for them and continuing to support them because we were on this Pan-African kick, not realizing, or perhaps not wanting to accept, that the rest of the black diaspora was on team white supremacy. That's what Jasmine Crockett ran into. That's what she failed to understand. Not that she's smart enough to get it in the first place. And now Jasmine Crockett's all hurt and angry that the Immigrant Caucus totally overlooked her, and just to add insult to injury, she said that some of those CBC members had the nerve to reach out and ask her for donations. But those same colleagues didn't even send her a text back then about that oversight job. You know, it is impossible for someone to be this stupid, and yet somehow the sassy city girl from Dallas managed to pull it off. The black grassroots are not surprised by any of this because we've been out here telling the truth about the Immigrant Caucus for many years now. Jasmine Crockett thought that she was going to get their support just because, and she found out the hard way that not only would she not get their support, she thought that she was a part of them and they weren't a part of her at all. Those same immigrants would turn right around and ask her to give them money when they wouldn't give her the time of day. And what will they do with that money? They'll support non-black candidates or other tethers. But what seemed to make Jasmine Crockett the most angry about getting rebuffed by the Immigrant Caucus was that Jasmine, as she put it, has the largest social media following of anyone who was trying to get that oversight committee seat. To her, that's what should have mattered, but it meant nothing to them. This is the political calculus that Jasmine Crockett does in her head. Clout chasing for political office. Clicks and views are supposed to automatically translate into political influence in her mind. If she has more subscribers or views than anyone else, then to her, that's supposed to mean she also has more clout, too. Every time you see her acting out in Congress, cussing and carrying on, or doing her cringe-inducing Kendrick Lamar parody dance, or her sassy city girl routine, that's her trying to get attention on social media, because she thinks that's her power. She's doing her own clumsy imitation of the Barack Obama playbook. He made it a point to argue on camera in the Senate against W's administration officials back in the day. Now, Obama didn't curse or get vulgar like Jasmine Crockett did, though. And while he didn't dance to Kendrick Lamar, he did dance on Ellen DeGeneres' show. And Kamala Harris did the same thing, arguing with Trump's cabinet officials when she was in the Senate, and dancing, if it can be called that, to Cardi B. When you see Jasmine Crockett bickering with the likes of Marjorie Taylor Greene, this is the well that she's drawing from. This is the real reason that she wanted that oversight seat so badly. She wants more opportunities to do some on-camera confrontations with Trump's people or other ranking Republicans so she can get some more face time for the cameras. Clout chasing. That's her MO. It's why she does all this stupid stuff, because she's chasing clicks and views and engagement numbers. That's what matters to her. But what she's not chasing is a black agenda. But then again, neither is the so-called Black Caucus that she's supposed to be part of. The Atlantic piece mentions how Crockett called Marjorie Greene a bleach blonde, bad-built butch body bimbo, which went viral. Crockett capitalized on that one literally by trademarking the phrase and making t-shirts about it. She's been getting lots of face time on white media, cable, and she's parlayed that into becoming one of the party's top fundraisers. And as she found out, all that meant to the party was that she can give that money to them. And as for her TV appearances, there was another politician who thought that getting his face on TV a lot and trying to win the war for engagements on social media would also translate into him becoming the leader of his party, Ron DeSantis. And I think we all know how that one worked out. DeSantis also couldn't get his own party to elevate him either. Even in his own state, he's now been reduced to having open fights with the same legislative Republicans who have backed all of his moronic culture war message legislation. Man, is any of this sounding familiar yet? And something else the Atlantic reporter talked about was how Crockett talked to her staff. Basically, the piece made her out to be an office tyrant, berating her staff members, complaining about the lunch that they brought to her, just making sure that whoever read it would perceive her as being loud, angry, wrong, and entitled. But one thing in particular that stood out to me is that the Atlantic reporter pointed out that the lock screen on Jasmine Crockett's cell phone was a picture of Jasmine Crockett herself. The Atlantic reporter, as well as all of these wannabe black leftists out there, they seemed to be surprised when they read that, but they shouldn't have been. I already knew that whenever Jasmine Crockett does some TV interview from her office, she always has two pictures behind her. The one on the right is Shirley Chisholm, though as often as not she'll have some other black woman politician, but the one on the left is always a photo of Jasmine Crockett herself. That photo never changes. Who is Jasmine Crockett's hero? Who does she most admire in the whole wide world? Why, Jasmine Crockett, of course. Now, isn't this exactly the kind of ego-driven narcissism that Democrats accuse Trump of? Someone who sits around admiring their own image all day. Their entire world revolves around themselves. Jasmine Crockett is a little egomaniac. She idolizes herself. Everything she does is to try to aggrandize herself and raise her own profile. But she's not doing it so that she can produce results for black people. See, I could see it one way if she was trying to create a cult of personality that would empower her to get things done for us, but she's not doing that. Everything she's doing is because the city girl congresswoman is trying to climb the political ladder for herself. So let's make sure that we get that straight. If Congresswoman Crockett was out there actually pressing our demands, if she was pushing for our interests, if she was representing our lineage and doing so boldly, well, as far as all the pictures of herself and lock screens and all the rest of it goes, my assessment of her under those circumstances would be, well, she's not entitled or wrong, she's just flamboyant. That's what I would say, because that's what all of these white folks say whenever you got a white person who's representing their interest. The white media comes along and says, hey, so-and-so is loud and wrong and overly flashy. They're just flamboyant. That would be my opinion of Jasmine Crockett, too, if she was representing our interests. My problem with her isn't her asinine antics per se. She's trying to get headlines, and I don't begrudge her that. What I resent is that she's trying to uphold and push an agenda that does not empower us. Sure, she's bringing up the whole Jeffrey Epstein thing, but the only reason Democrats are even doing that is because they're desperately hoping that this is going to drive a wedge between the orange man and his white base. The Atlantic piece was meant to deflate Jasmine Crockett. And no, I don't think that these kind of things are just coming out of nowhere. I think some people in the Democratic Party want this out there. We've seen it before with Alexandria Cortez. She ran her mouth a little bit too much about Nancy Pelosi, and next thing you know, she was getting criticized by the same leftist media that had previously been calling her a rising star in the party. And she was also hearing publicly that she could very well find herself getting primaried. Nancy Pelosi was the congressional Democrat who controlled more donor dollars than anyone else. That's why the Democrats bowed to her. She had access to a ready supply of cash. The message to AOC was clear. You better start learning to toe the line unless you want to go back to being a bartender again. AOC decided she preferred serving Nancy Pelosi to serving drinks at a bar. This seems like the same power sending the same message to Jasmine Crockett, too. She can daydream about being president all she wants, but if she keeps making a fuss, then she won't even be able to dream about being in Congress anymore. White supremacy loves a cruel prank, especially one that takes a long time to pay off. The white media likes to set some unsuspecting Negro up only to crush them to the ground later on, all the while letting their victim believe that they've got all of these friends around them. They put these tools on TV, they go ahead and give them some honorary title or other, and when they do, they make sure to give them phony praise and give them phony accolades, and these simple-minded chumps actually buy into the hype and think that these people like them, that they're going to be the next big thing when white power's already decided they're going to be the next big nothing. Rising star simply means that you can work yourself to death to support their power, like you can become an effective fundraiser, and then give that money to them while they turn their behinds up at you and go looking to support anybody other than you. When you choose to become a bootlick, you've chosen to take part in an abusive relationship. This Atlantic piece is exactly what it was meant to be, a slap in the face to the sassy city girl. They're going ahead and putting her in her place, and they're making it where there's not a whole lot that she can do about it, and they're reflecting it and echoing it and repeating it. That's how they go ahead and peel somebody's hide off of them publicly. This is how they flog a bootlick publicly. That's what's happening to her, and all she can do is take it. I'm not going to say that this is the end of Jasmine Crockett, far from it. But it does show that if you decide that you're going to be some bootlick for white power, well, you better get used to getting kicked around, because that comes with the territory too. I've said it before, and it bears repeating here. There's only one difference between a rising star and a falling star: the direction they're going in. Good day, and be one. I'd like to take a moment to mention some of our contributors: Mark Anderson, James Porter, Neil Saphir, Starlet Thompson, and Pamela Hyman. Salute to them, and thank you to everyone for listening, liking, and sharing this message. Black empowerment only exists because of you.